So there's many different ways that you can tame cobalt volcanoes, and this is just something that I put together the other day in a colony that I'm currently working on, the beautiful Utopia. And what this does is it's quite simple. I haven't had any issues with it. It gets the cobalt out of here, cools it, and then it's automatically fed through, where it goes through a little bit of a cooling loop over here, in a nice little chilled box. And then once it gets spit out up here, this auto sweeper picks it up and delivers it into my internal base storage at a nice chilled temperature. So refined cobalt is really good for building stuff that tends to take a lot of resources. Let's have a look here. So conductive wire, refined cobalt, something that you would use, automation wire. So it's things like that. It's not worked for, it doesn't work for everything. And it doesn't have any crazy special properties. It's got, it says here high thermal conductivity. It has a thermal conductivity of 100 and a specific heat capacity of 0.4. So it's not the best, but it's not the worst. Definitely aluminum would be better for... I got an aluminum volcano somewhere. I don't know where it is at the moment. But yeah, so it's not as good as like something like aluminum, but it's still really good. And as you can see that once you tame one of these guys, I have 91 tons and counting. And there's still, stuff coming out of it, and it just continues to go up. There's more than I could ever use, and that works great because it makes it really easy for me to just basically spam anything that I want, whether it's radiant pipes or if it's conductive wire or any of that good stuff. So the way that I started this build was I initially blocked off the volcano, and I made 2 small enclosures. I had one small enclosure that was immediately around the volcano, and then I did a larger enclosure that went over top of the whole thing. And this was just because I wanted to be able to vacuum and work in the area before I actually released the volcano's steam into, the box. Volcanoes, they're easy to tame, but they're also, you have to be cautious because they're hot. And even though this isn't the hottest, you're still dealing with molten cobalt that's coming out at 2226 degrees Celsius. So that's pretty hot, and you can have a lot of problems if you're not careful with it. So I started with that, and then I put in 2 liquid locks right here. So in the liquid locks, I'm using petroleum. And the reason that I'm using it is just because it has a very high evaporation point, and it also has a low freezing point. Now, obviously, the freezing isn't an issue here, but having a good evaporation point. And I just like to use liquids that I know that I'm not going to have to worry about. Petroleum and oil. Not going to show up for me here, but petroleum and oil are 2 of my favorites when it comes to liquid locks. And there are lots of different styles of liquid locks, as you may or may not know. I tend to default to this one. And the reason why I default to this is because I find it's just so easy to lay down. And I basically just do 3 diagonal and then 3 diagonal up. And then I just double click over the top. And it's just, something that I've remembered, and it goes really fast. And so that's why I do that. And then what I like to do is I always just put a liquid vent in this one right here, and it'll just fill it, and then eventually it will overfill, or it will get pressurized and it'll stop filling, and then I just close it up. So I like to use those. They're not as fancy or as nice looking as some of the other styles, but they work great. So let's have a look at what's going on in here. So regarding the steam turbines, both of the steam turbines are made out of steel. And pretty much everything in here is steel, minus, I guess, some of this, which the bottle drainers and stuff, I guess, I put those in after the fact, because I've been moving some stuff around as I go here. But the stuff that really matters is made out of steel. Now, initially, I had vacuumed this section out, but But of course, the problem with that is that then you have to start individually cooling each item, because anything that doesn't have the ability to get rid of temperature, right, becomes will just start to slowly creep in heat. So for instance, we look here, right? So we've got these conduction panels, sorry, underneath the turbines, and those things are staying nice and cool. And then, you know, you've got the power transformer. Well, that starts to heat up, and you got to put, you know, something to cool that in as well. But then because all of this stuff up here, when it, my sweeper and the loader, those things, you know, were starting to overheat. And even if they're made out of steel, you know, they can just creep up, and they'll slowly take it on. And I was getting tired of having to cool everything individually. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna put some gases in here to even that out. And as you can see, it, you know, is working like a charm. So for the gas, obviously I went with hydrogen. And the reason I went with hydrogen is because hydrogen is just really good at moving temperatures around as long as you have something to dump the heat into. And I just so happened to find a hydrogen vent here yesterday, which I'm in the process of dealing with, but I'm not done. And so I just piped it out. Let's see if we can find it. I just ran a line all the way down, and then we just filled this thing up, and that solved any potential heat issues that were going on in here. So that was nice and easy. Now, you could, in theory, you know, put the stuff that you're concerned about temperatures, you could attach it to a floor tile. If it was operating in a vacuum space, you could attach it to a floor tile that was, you know, had some cooling. So maybe you would have, let's say, if this tile was metal, and you could bring that in, and then you could put it on top of the metal tile. I believe that'll deal with things like that. But, you know, sometimes as much as operating in a vacuum can be really good. And I, you know, have learned that operating in a vacuum is, you know, generally easier and better 9 times out of 10. So I never, I always take the time to make sure I vacuum all my spaces out now. And it was a long time of, you know, I spent, you know, well over, you know, 1,500 hours into the game. And most of the time I never even bothered to vacuum out my spaces. And then eventually, you know, you learn, hey, you got to vacuum them out. It's really important. So yeah, so sometimes it's better to run some sort of, you know, air or gas to help dissipate and deal with the heating issues. So as we look at the steam turbines here, you can see that they're both ditching out their water, which is coming out at 94 degrees. And then it comes together here, and then we're just dumping it in with the volcano, which is pretty standard stuff when you're you know, dealing with any sort of steam rooms. I also have this bottle drainer, which is how I initially primed the room after I had sealed it off. And then with my cooling loop here, we're also using petroleum, and that I loaded from down here, which works really great. This tiles, as far as our cooling here, I'm using steel tiles, and I don't think I necessarily needed to use steel tiles for this. I just, you know, once I start to unlock steel, and anytime I'm dealing with anything that's, you know, has the potential to have extreme temperatures, I just kind of throw steel at it to make sure that there's no problems. But the steel works great. And, you know, a lot of times you'll see people in their builds, they, you know, put metal tiles, and you're like, you know, we know that it has something to do with temperature exchange. But the thing is that if you've never been told, or if you've never understood why people do that, it's because that the metal just does it's better than using the radiant pipes at, you know, moving the temperatures around. So basically, you know, you're going to cool your metal tiles. You're going to find a metal that works for the temperature ranges that you're dealing with. And then that way, when you cool those metal tiles, it makes it a lot easier and gives you, you know, better transfer. So that's why you do that. And so here you can see that the reason why we've had to put this in is because it would be problematic to constantly be running in here to pick up this cobalt, and everything that's in here is basically too hot and is hazardous to my dupes. So this stuff is like, you know, even if I click on this obsidian that's just, you know, basically leftover dirt that's sitting on the ground that, you know, I was hoping is going to get swept out eventually, is sitting at, you know, 135 degrees Celsius. And then, of course, this cobalt, like, look at this, 587. It comes out hot. And then the liquid, you know, comes out even hotter. And so, you know, you can't have your dupes running in here. And then the problem that you'll see is that when you want to build something, it'll say you have cobalt, and then you'll queue something up to use cobalt, and they will run in here and grab the most ridiculous hot metal they can find, and then they will go and build something somewhere, and they'll burn themselves, and then they'll build out of it in your colony, and you'll have something that's really hot and cause you all sorts of problems. So once you have this set up, you have to seal it. And you want it coming out automatically. And this is where the auto sweeping system comes into play, as well as the cooling box. So very basic system here. So this is basically set up to just take anything that it finds, and then the sweepers, you know, load it in, and then we've got a conveyor shutoff. And the conveyor shutoff is linked up, if I recall. I linked it to my sensor here. Yeah, so the conveyor shutoff is up here, linked with this. So it wants to know if, you know, this thing is open or closed, because what'll happen is that my system would back up, and I could redo these rails a little bit so that it was, you know, more efficient. There's a bunch of empty spaces and whatnot, but I don't feel like digging in here and taking it apart to put it back together. And I don't like using sandbox modes and you know, and the dev modes and all that stuff when I'm building stuff, unless I'm really showing things for videos, because I like to play the game, and I feel like it ruins the game for me when I mess around with, like, you know, cheat code spam stuff and the ability to just throw stuff down. So I try my best to not mess with that. So when I'm, you know, sometimes making or trying to record a video, I actually will spend hours trying to, you know, build it or to do it myself, because I just don't want to use the dev mode, because I just don't want to ruin the game for myself. Not to say that I don't do it, but I avoid it or only use it when, you know, I feel like it's really necessary to explain something. Anyhow, so we have this conveyor shut off, and so this has to shut off. So basically we shut this off so that way it continues to go through the loop. Otherwise, this would just back up, and then once it backed up to this point, the whole conveyor system will stop spinning. So this is like an essential piece to this whole thing. Now, when it comes to this guy right here, we've got a Conveyor Rail Thermo Sensor, and now I have this set to 0 right now. Not necessary. I had it up to like 25 earlier, but I just find it's easier to maintain because I'm trying to keep this back room nice and cold as well. It's easier if I keep this really cold to spread it up here. So if I dump this and I start dumping out at 25 degrees Celsius, then you'll slowly see that heat creep, and then this room starts to turn orange, and like it stays cool. I didn't have an issue with it overheating, but I felt like it was creeping up, and I just didn't feel like messing with it. So I just came and dropped this quickly, and it still works because you're just operating in a lower threshold. But once your system cools in that range, it's basically the same. You know, it's just you're still operating within whatever range you've set it to. So some of you may be familiar with this. This is, you know, kind of a standard system that you have. So you have the signals coming in from your thermo sensor here, and then it's running to the chute, which is dumping it all out. And so because there's an intake, right? This white, you know, this white intake. And then what you do is you just run a bridge beside it, or anything that has like another white intake on directly beside it. Now, if I was to move this bridge down and it wasn't white beside the white, sometimes that causes me problems. So I always like to make sure that they're right beside each other. I do that in like, you know, most of my cooling loops. So we'll go back to this one over here. You'll see same thing. You know, I put it right beside it. And the reason that this works well is it's just, you know, it's just saying that If the temperature is above 0 or below 0, then you can open this and it will open and the stuff will fall out. And then when it goes above 0, this closes. And then because this is basically sucking stuff in, it just takes it into the tile beside it and then spits it out. So these are simple loops. And this loop style is very universal in a lot of ways. But sometimes the order does matter. I see a lot of people, you know, have issues with the order of where they put their bridges and stuff because, you know, their aqua tuners will back up and they won't flow. You see people that are essentially they have to remove liquids out of the pipes and do different things because, you know, their pipes are over-tuned. They can't handle it, right? But it's been my experience that, like, if I take this pipe, I can reconnect this to my system and it's not going to stop, you know? I can speed it up so that it looks like it's going all fast and efficient, but it still goes. And then because when you set it up properly, it will just continue to run. And you don't have to empty the liquids out and mess with it. And I'll show you the difference and why it's doing that in a minute. Anyhow, so slow this down here. So this is what's going on with this. So basically it runs through here and we've picked up the cobalt or whatever's on the ground. It's going through here and then it's getting cooled, gets dumped, and then it gets picked up and shipped into the base just to, you know, prevent people from having to run in here. So that works great. And that's an easy way to go about it. Again, everything inside the box here is all made out of steel. You don't want to have to go in here and mess around to any extent. Steam, you can see I've got a healthy amount of steam in here. We've got 100 kilograms in some spots, but, you know, I leave this bottle drainer here and, you know, you could just keep throwing water in here and it would just, you know, keep adding steam and stuff. So once you get your boxes nice and full, you don't have to worry about it, of course, and it'll just kind of run and do its thing. So that's good for that. So let's have a look at what we did with the aqua tuner and our cooling loop that we have going on with this. So we have a couple of key components here, right? So we need to cool the top space, which is the vacuum, or which was the vacuum, I should say, because we got to make sure that all of this stuff isn't overheating. So obviously we have the conduction panels that are running underneath the tiles, and that's ensuring that all this gets chilled. And then the hydrogen is picking up any extra heat in the room and basically can dump it into those buildings that are being actively cooled. So that's why that stays cool like this. Same thing with here, the petroleum comes back out. And if you look, it's after it does basically the whole heating, it's still coming out at, you know, 8 degrees. So it's running very chilled. It's running very cool. So it comes back through, and then pretty standard, we have a thermo pipe sensor here, which is basically acting as the same as the conveyor system that we just looked at. And this has a automation wire attached to it. That is triggering when this should turn on or turn off based off of the temperature. And then, of course, if the temperature falls below, you know, 20, minus 20, it would basically shut this down. And then, as you can see here, it starts to, it just bypasses. And then this way, you know, your loops are continuing as it goes. So that's a great way to do it. So the thing that I was talking about earlier with these systems getting backed up, and because this is kind of like a standard cooling loop that you would use for cooling water or, you know, anything for that matter. The important part, in my opinion, at least, is that it's how you set up these bridges here. And what I've noticed, or why I think that it always works for me, is because I make sure that the liquid is coming out first from the aqua tuner, and then that it basically comes out after this. So it's basically taking priority over the bridge. because it comes out, it goes in before it goes in on that one. It comes out before it comes out here on the line. And then where it joins, it's joining in front of the bridge, which is blocking it. You know, I'm not sure if that's like the scientific reason, but I know this works, and I know that this is how I always do it. And so when I'm building them, I always just say, you know, comes out before, goes on the line after here. And then you'll see over here, it's the exact same setup that I do, where basically it will comes out before and then connects after. And that ensures that these lines don't have any backup issues. So if you have issues with your aqua tuners backing up, and, you know, because sometimes these things will go packet for packet. You know, you'll see them where they're like going one in, one past, one in, one past. And that's annoying. So this is how I've solved it. I'm sure there's other people there's lots of different ways. Again, I like to play the game. So I'm not somebody that quickly, I don't reach to watch what somebody else does very quickly. I mean, I do, but like not in the sense of, I like to learn what other people do, but I like to learn it my own way, and I like to figure it out my own way. Because if I you know, remove that entertainment concept for myself, then I would lose motivation to play, and I would lose motivation to, you know, make videos and all that good stuff. So I like to, even if I know that, hey, somebody else does something and it works like this, I'll still sit here and try to figure out, you know, why isn't it working, and how can I make it work for me, so in a way that I understand or in a way that I like. So that's good for that. What else can we talk about here regarding this? So the outside insulated tiles, of course, and there's really not that much to it, honestly, when you think about it. A lot of standard concepts is regarding the power situation. If we have a look at our power lines, so I am running the heavy watts inside here, and the reason that I'm doing that is because I want to have any extra power that's being produced on my line, so that way it is feeding the power system that's going into the base. I haven't fully optimized my power. The colony is, you know, still under development. But yeah, so this is why we use the heavy watt up here, so we don't have any issues with that. And of course we are getting plus 850 on both of those, and there's some big numbers playing on this, so we just do it that way. And then I added this this transformer here, which using conductive wire, and this is what's actually going into the room. It is all steel as well. And then obviously conductive wire has a potential load capacity of 2,000 watts, and the numbers on this make that acceptable. So that works great for this. And then I wanted to make sure you don't want to have a heavy wire bridge, because the heavy wire bridges leak heat, right? And that's a big issue with that is that if you bounce in and out of your base like this, or I mean, that's not technically inside the base, but when you bounce inside your you know, kind of thermal area, you're going to leak heat. So you really want to avoid that whenever you can. But yeah, that's kind of how you can basically tame a cobalt volcano. And this applies to anything, really. You could apply this to other sorts of volcanoes. You may have to adjust the amount of turbines, you know, just to be efficient. And I could, you know, build this more efficiently. I could have made this space smaller. I could have done the conveyor overlay in a way that it would have probably a better capacity for cooling more of the cobalt faster, and have, you know, less runaround space. And there's always efficiency stuff, but this works for me, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. But yeah, that's it. So if you guys have any questions about it, or if there's any, you know, weird quirks that trouble you when you're trying to design stuff like this, whether it's a cooling issue or if it's a loop issue or anything like that, you know, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I will answer it to the best of my ability. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.